Take three. Hi folks, welcome. This is Mr. Deep, and today I would like to talk about possession and unconsciousness. Just a warning at the beginning, this is quite deep and a little eerie at times, so if that's not your bag, maybe skip to one of my other videos. So basically, today, when I talk about possession, often people think of demon possession and movies like The Exorcist. And as you may be aware, the Bible and many other sort of older texts talk about, spirits and possession and things like this. And what I want to say at the beginning, which will seem strange, but I will try to explain myself, is that I regard possession as the norm in our world today, rather than this kind of freak here and there. I see possession as the norm, and I see it just manifesting in, I guess, less obvious ways than the typical Exorcist movie. That's generally speaking. And, so what is possession? I guess you could give it different descriptions. I say one of the descriptions is being under another's will. So I'm sort of breaking it down. It's being under another's will. And, I guess the thing with this is that most people would say, I have will, I'm in control, therefore possession and being under another's will. Okay, I do things that are not my will, like my boss and this, but generally most people would declare that they have a will. And from a basic perspective, that's kind of true, but from a deeper perspective, that may not be true, and I'll try to explain why. There are writers such as Moraviev, Gurdjieff, Russian fellas. Then there's also Ouspensky, and they declare something which seems controversial. They say that man has no will, or rather, man imagines he has a will, which is it's kind of strange for the ordinary person to consider this idea. In general, man is governed by his instincts, his passions, his aversions, and his fears, amongst other things. To put it in another way, these fellas, and I kind of agree with them, they talk about the centers, especially, they all do actually. They talk about the centers, the instinct, the motor, which is motion, the emotional, the intellectual, and of course the sexual center. And what they regard as the common man, the ordinary man, is his centers or her centers are in chaos. In other words, you have certain centers overstepping and doing the work of the other centers, dominating, or you have other centers not fulfilling their correct function. And so essentially, man is controlled by the chaos of the centers. And to add to this, man's self-image, his actual self, these guys would regard his own self to be an illusion. And the reason why it's an illusion is because of the contradictory nature of most people's identity, their self. Like they are one thing and another thing. The Buddhists talk about this also. And it's forever changing, but man sees himself as a fixed self, and in that sense his self is rather an illusion. It's many competing eyes, which very much connects with a mixed up being with your centers that are also dominating one moment and taking a back step. Chaos is probably the right word. And I think in this sense, it might sound strange, but we hear that expression, man is legion. And when really one understands themselves as they're developing spiritually, they should be able to see this. They should be able to see the contradiction and all of these different forces and factors and centers and that seem like one thing, but it's sort of legion and it's more chaotic. And the man not being in control of that is essentially, I think, where the guys like Moraviev are saying, man does not have a will. On a deeper level, man doesn't. He is at the mercy of these forces within himself, you could say. And they would also say that man is not a true man. in a esoteric, in a deeper sense. Since he doesn't know himself, he only imagines that he knows himself, and this is the goal: is to get to know yourself, not in an imagined superficial way, but to really deeply know yourself. So man is essentially governed by forces he neither sees, admits, or understands. And this is where possession comes in, because it's a form of possession, and it's very common to the average person, because these forces control him rather than him being actually in control. And this, it's quite interesting, because these writers I mentioned, they explain this possession in very psychological terms, which I find interesting. And they all present, varying pictures, but they are saying very similar things with some alterations or little digressions that are slightly different in their overall view on man. And I find Moraviev's work very interesting, because he talks in cosmic terms as well as the psychological. So he says that, and this is my quoting him or paraphrasing, he says that the earth or the world functions to deny man a true will. He says that this is the cosmic function of our Maya, our illusion, our world, our planet, this system that we're actually in. Some people call this the Matrix and other such things. It's a system that orchestrates to keep a man asleep and without will. And basically, a man of exception is a man who beats the system, escapes the system, and in doing so, as he does that, he develops a genuine, authentic, unified group of senses and a genuine will. Moraviev also says that the executioner, so the jurisdiction of this system, is under the master, and the master is the devil, the ruler of the world. And some of you may not believe in the devil, and I understand that. But what I think is interesting is Moraviev doesn't really, he takes the sting out of the devil in a sense, because he explains things more cosmically, and also he doesn't really demonize the devil. It's kind of, it is what it is, so to speak, that, and this is my thinking, you can give this thing different names, but give it a character, a personality, but there is a force that keeps a man asleep, that operates through the system, the world that we have, and you can give it a name. I'm quite poetic and I like my imagination, so I come up with characters, but you could call it a cosmic principle as well. So that would fit more into spiritual science, I guess. And the devil is kind of part of this cosmic process. So based on all of this, my point is that possession is the natural order of our world. In man and women in their current state today is a form of possession, a form of sleep, and not really not really having a will of their own. And I think the goal is to realize that you do not have a will, and also to develop a true will, an authentic will. And it's interesting, because as you develop this will, as you escape the system, and as you escape the system, you will realize and be able to remove all the parts within you that are not under your control. In other words, you will unplug all the aspects that are possessing you, if that makes sense. Okay. The other thing also is to understand that overcoming this world is not done by the belief in it. As you know, there are religions, particularly Christianity, that they believe in the one who's overcome the world. Therefore, they are saved, not possessed, awakened, whichever term you want to put. And I would have to disagree with that the overcoming the world is something that one has to do with their own efforts, but as they genuinely show the efforts and seeking truth with all their heart and understanding themselves properly, another cosmic principle comes into play, and that's the guidance, the divine guidance that kind of helps you navigate and pop to step outside of the system, the matrix, be saved, awaken, whatever expression you'd like to say, be free. Now, to Jung, he talked a lot about the unconscious and the effort man and a woman needs to make to turn this unconscious into something conscious. And I guess to put another way is we must discover our shadows, what's lurking behind that we're not seeing. Basically, an unconscious person imagines he's conscious, but is unknowingly possessed by his unconscious. So he doesn't know there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, but what directs his life, relationship, decisions, reality, and even fate is the stuff that's hidden that he's not seeing. This is why it's important to make the unconscious conscious. And another writer I find interesting is Carlos Castaneda. Now, in the book The Active Side of Infinity, he talks about the flyers, which kind of freaks people out a little bit, but I find it very interesting. So the flyers are, I guess, a bit like, in terms of character, the archons, the demons. You could call them spiritual parasites from another dimension. Maybe that's the way of putting it. And essentially what they do, these parasites, the flyers, they feed on man's lower vibrational consciousness. And they also seek to keep a man docile, keep a man asleep so they can continue to feed. And obviously it's a bit of a shocking idea because man thinks he's top of the food chain. But if you think in terms of the dimensions and other dimensions, perhaps our own consciousness is a form of food for other beings, and the goal is to deprive the food, which would mean developing the will and breaking the chains in which you are food for such entities. It's also said that the flyers give us their mind, which is a kind of foreign installation. And if you think about that, it doesn't mean our whole mind is not ours, but there's been an installation, almost a program put in so that we think kind of like these parasites. And it's funny, if you look in nature, you'll see this similar kind of hijacking. And this, I think, is interesting because, again, it's another way of looking at this sort of possession, this influence, and we're not really autonomous and really having our own will. And also we don't understand the otherness of factors around us that are really perhaps causing us to think away, act away, and remain asleep, essentially. Maybe these ideas are interesting to you, but what I would say is, develop yourself, because it's not about just believing what I say, it's about having direct experience. This is the most important, because with belief, you're vulnerable to all kinds of deception. But when you truly directly experience and you develop yourself so you are able to open up the higher centers, your intuition, and these sorts of things, then you can know yourself. That was always the plan. Belief is such a lower form in terms of trying to really understand our spiritual reality in this world. So to sum this up, from my perspective, possession is the norm in our world, and also so is unconsciousness. And the unconscious in itself possesses a man that hasn't made that conscious in his life. And also we have really very few people on this planet right now that have a real will. They have only an imagined will. And if you walk the true path of awakening, you will at some point realize an active force that is seeking to keep you asleep. You can give this force a name or call it a cosmic principle as you wish, but its nature is universal, but it's applied to each man and woman according to his weakness. And in summary, the goal essentially is to know thyself, to establish a real will and become a real person in a cosmic, authentic sense. Thank you.